and welcome to those of you watching Tigrai TV on satellite television, as well as on our social media platforms, Facebook and YouTube. I'm Saplor Lama, and I'm here with the English news for the hour. Moving on to the first news, Tigray External Affairs Office issued a statement today expressing its support for the people of Oromia as they fight to protect their constitutionally enshrined rights for self-administration and self-determination. The office says the people and government of Tigray stand unequivocally with the people of Oromia as they exercise their legitimate right to self-defense. Abil Tikabu reports.
The government of Tigray issued a statement on Tuesday to express its support for the fight of the Oromo people to secure their constitutionally enshrined right for self-administration and self-determination. The statement said since its ascension, Abiy Ahmed has been clearly waging a non-stop war against all forces committed to preserve Ethiopia's multinational federal dispensation, which has pushed the state to brink of irreversible failure. The government of Tigray said it appreciates the people of Oromo as they have consistently stood against Abiy Ahmed's relentless assault on the foundation of Ethiopia's federal system. The statement recalled that the Ethiopian government has undertaken a series of brutal military crackdowns in Oromia under the disguise of law enforcement operation. In recent weeks, the Ethiopian government embarked on a new round of military campaign across Oromia designed to eliminate Oromo Liberation Front that has been fighting against the oppressive regime to protect hard-won rights of the people of Oromo. The government of Tigray called on the Ethiopian government to abandon its destructive obsession with force as the solution to fundamental political clash, start treating citizens with different ideas about the nature of the state with dignity and respect they deserve. The statement finally stated that the people and government of Tigray firmly believe that only genuine and all-inclusive national dialogue in which all relevant stakeholders partake is the only way out.
A report by Agence France-Presse has revealed that more than 500 Tigrayan UN peacekeepers stationed in the disputed Abyei region between Sudan and South Sudan have asked for political asylum as the Ethiopian government continues to ethnically profile and prosecute Tigrayans living in Addis Ababa and other parts of Ethiopia. Tigrayan members of Ethiopia's National Defense Forces have been a primary target of arbitrary detention and torture since the start of Ethiopia's 19-month-long war on Tigray. The soldiers say they would like to speak up for their people currently living under a comprehensive communications blackout imposed by the Ethiopian government. Our reporter Abraha Gabratinsai has more for us.
A report by Agence France-Presse have revealed that more than 520 UN peacekeepers stationed in Abyei, a disputed border region between Sudan and South Sudan, have refused to return to Ethiopia, citing fears of ethnic persecution by the Ethiopian government. The soldiers said Tigrayans in Ethiopia were being ethnically profiled and targeted for arrest and torture in Ethiopia, and especially highlighted the selective and unlawful detention of thousands of Tigrayan members of Ethiopia's National Defense Forces as a major concern. Ethiopian forces accounted for the vast majority of the close to 4,000-member peacekeeping mission in Abyei until last year, before they were replaced by a multinational force as ties between Addis Ababa and Khartoum deteriorated. Citing witnesses, the report stated that most of the Ethiopian forces have returned home, but a total of 528 Ethiopian soldiers from Tigray have requested asylum in Sudan. Tigrayan officers were removed from army ranks soon after the war erupted, while ordinary Tigrayans have described being subjected to arbitrary arrests in Addis Ababa since the start of the war in November 2020.
This weekend, Tigrayans stood side by side with the Armenian community to mark the 103rd anniversary of the Armenian genocide. The demonstrators called on the Turkish government to recognize the genocide committed on the people of Armenia that saw more than 400,000 people killed and 1.5 million displaced. The diaspora also called on the Turkish government to halt the sale of Turkish arms to the Ethiopian government, whose war on Tigray has already cost 500,000 civilian lives. Sara Kalali.
This weekend, Tigrayans march along Armenians to mark the 107th anniversary of the Armenian genocide that resulted in the death of more than 400,000 Armenians and the displacement of more than 1.5 million. The protesters called on the Turkish government to formally admit its role on the genocide.
we want to say to Turkey to recognize the Armenian genocide. So say, Turkey, recognize the Armenian genocide.
Turkey, recognize the Armenian genocide.
Turkey, recognize the Tigrayan genocide.
Turkey, recognize the Tigrayan genocide.
The protesters also called on the Turkish government to bring halt to the supply of drones to Ethiopia that have been used to target civilians and civilian infrastructures, including an IDP camp in northwestern Tigray, killing 59 civilians and injuring scores more.
500,000 people already died by Turkish drones and other countries like China, Russian drones.
The protesters also brought to light the systematic and deliberate violence perpetrated on Tigrayan women, saying that more than 120,000 had been raped and tortured.
And 120,000 women were raped. They are trying to cleanse the Tigrayan identity. They literally said they want to cleanse us. After they rape our women, they are stuffing sharp objects in their private areas and saying they don't want no more Tigrayan babies to be born. They want to destroy us.
The protesters asked the international community to pay sufficient attention to the crisis before many more lose their lives.
It's a genocide going on in Tigray and it's highly being ignored.
The 10-month-long blockade on Tigray has prevented the entry of much-needed food aid, life-saving medical supplies, and other urgently needed items. As a result of this, many have been subjected to otherwise preventable deaths. Our reporter Salome Tigrai visited Eider Comprehensive Specialized Hospital and spoke with patients who are suffering from lack of food and medical supplies.
Mebrahte Hagazi comes from Raya. She has been in Eider Comprehensive Specialized Hospital with her sick grandson for almost 2 months now. The child's mother had died while giving birth to him, so the responsibility of raising and taking care of him falls on Mebrahte, who is still grieving her daughter's death. She has used every ounce of energy and money to see her grandson in a better health condition, but the hospital has nothing more to offer as it has run out of almost all medical supplies. She has run out of money to buy medications from private pharmacies as well.
We are in a terrible situation. We have no money left for anything. I have finished all the money I had brought. I have no money to buy medication. I have no money to buy food as well. We are starving and we have nowhere to go. The hospital has run out of all the medications, but still I am sitting here, for I can't go home carrying a sick child.
Siyum Teka is another patient we met in Eider Comprehensive Specialized Hospital. He was admitted into the hospital 5 months ago. He needs a constant supply of oxygen, but with the unstable electricity in Tigray, the hospital is not able to make enough oxygen. Siyum says he's suffering because of this.
The hospital can't make oxygen and I need oxygen. I get oxygen one day and I have to go without it the next day. This is really difficult. The lights are out all the time, so the hospital can produce oxygen. There seems to be no solution.
Eider Referral Hospital had previously been providing food to its patients, but last week it had announced that it had been forced to discontinue meal services due to the 10-month-long siege that has blocked the delivery of food aid and all forms of commercial goods into Tigray.
There is no food. The hospital used to provide food, but it is unable to anymore.
The hospital used to give a shiro. The shiro was served without salt as the price of salt spiked. Now even that is non-existent. This is difficult, especially for those who came from rural areas. They have left the hospital because how can they stay? There is no medication and no food. It is really difficult to be hopeful. This is beyond the hospital's capacity though. The doctors are treating us with an empty stomach. The same is true for all the staff of the hospital.
Despite there being close to 4 million people in Tigray in dire need of medical assistance, Abiy Ahmed's government continues to block the entry of medical supplies and all essential items into the region.
The violence on civilians across the state has resulted in more than 2.2 million displaced persons seeking shelter in cities across the state. Ethiopian forces are now blocking food aid, medical supplies, and other essential items necessary for the IDPs to survive. Our reporter Saron Tsagai visited Sawa Kare IDP Center in Magala and spoke with IDPs displaced from Western Tigray due to the ethnic cleansing campaign and are now unable to access basic necessities due to the Ethiopian government's blockade on all forms of aid.
A month has lapsed since the humanitarian truce was declared between the government of Ethiopia and the government of Tigray. Yet no meaningful humanitarian assistance has reached in the hands of the much-awaiting people of Tigray. The trickling aid getting into Tigray is almost negligible compared to the amount of humanitarian assistance required. IDPs sheltering in Maqale Sawakare camp say that even though it's been almost 2 months since they came here, they're still struggling to get a daily meal. Alayu Adhanu was resident of Adebai, a small town in western Tigray. On the 4th of November, he and several others were abducted from Teklahaimano Church in their village by Fano vigilante group. He says that horrendous crimes have been committed upon them for months.
Exactly on the 4th of November, I and several others were abducted from Teklahaimano Church in Adebai. The beating and the killings of that day were so terrifying. It's so hard to put it in words. While we were there, they had already taken everything we owned, including our money, livestock, everything. After we were detained in a warehouse, we were constantly beaten and tortured. Because of the intensity of the beating, we lost 6 men. When we tried to bury them, they had beaten us too. So we left them unburied. On the 30th of November, they chose few elderly detainees and released us.
Yordanus Futsum's husband and her 4 brothers were also abducted the same day, from the same place and by the same group. She says that they were then put into a warehouse nearby. She and her remaining family members left on the 15th of November with nothing but a clothes on their backs.
I was resident of Satit Humera. At the start of the conflict, I fled to Adebai because my family used to live there. But the Fano vigilante group didn't let us live in peace there. They would come to our houses day and night, asking for money and our gold jewelries. When they didn't find any, they would beat us, saying we had hid it somewhere. Everyone here has been beaten at least once. After they detained my brothers and my husband, we left on the 15th of November, leaving everything behind, as we had no choice.
The IDPs say that after leaving their homes with nothing, they went to Hitsat's IDP camp and suffered due to lack of basic necessities. Hoping that things might be better in here, they came to Maqala about 2 months ago. They say that they're still struggling to find daily meal as aid getting into Tigray isn't nearly enough. With her husband and her son still detained back in Adebai, Zimam Adane came here with her elderly father who has a sight problem and her father-in-law. She says that during her first weeks in an IDP camp, her elderly father-in-law passed away because he was already weak from lack of food.
My
husband and my firstborn son are detained back there. I left with my elderly father with a sight problem and my father-in-law for Hatzat's IDP camp. We were unable to find food there, and we had elderly and children with us. So hopeful that things might be better here, we came to Maqale. During the first weeks of us getting here, I lost my father-in-law, as he was already weakened by lack of food. Now I have nothing to feed my children. We need the international community to see us as we are suffering.
We have nothing to eat. We are sleeping on the floor. I haven't even washed this blanket once as I have no soap.
The few internally displaced persons who were lucky enough to receive aid say that it isn't enough and that there are many left without any kind of aid.
Only few of us got a meager aid. The people here are in thousands. There are so many left with no aid. So we call on aid agencies to get more aid into Tigray.
We thank the aid we received, however very small in amount. Yet we need more life-saving aid, as we have several brothers and sisters who didn't get any. So I would like to say to the international community and aid agencies, please help us. We call for the blockade to be lifted and aid to be allowed in a meaningful amount, and now.
Since the start of the blockade, only less than 6% of much-needed aid has arrived in Tigray.
More than 1 million people were displaced from western Tigray following the ethnic cleansing campaign committed by Ethiopian forces on Tigrayans living in that area. Our reporters spoke to IDPs that shared the horrific events that eventually forced them to abandon their homes. Haile Gabru has more for us.
In the month of April last year, Eritrean soldiers would commit yet another horrific act of massacre in western Tigray, where dozens of civilians were brutally murdered. Families of the victims who witnessed the horrors of the massacre have this to say.
People have been massacred, tortured, and gang raped by the Ethiopian forces and their allies. Their cruelty has no limit. In our culture, killing human being is immoral. We are living in the same country, but what they did is fratricidal.
ህዝቢ ትግራይ ካብ ብኩናት ክውድኡና ስለ ዘይከኣሉ ብጥሜት ንምንጻር
They are using starvation as a weapon of war because they couldn't exterminate all of us with bullets alone. It is heartbreaking to see that children and mothers are dying due to hunger. What the Eritrean troops did to me is like never seen before. I have never experienced and heard such a thing in my life. They looted and burnt everything I had ever worked for.
International human rights groups and members of the Tigray diaspora must amplify the suffering of the people of Tigray and let perpetrators held accountable as soon as possible.
ማሕበረሰብ ዓለም ኣብ ልዕሊ
The international community must act now. It's been almost 19 months since Tigray has been cut off from the rest of the world. We are dying due to lack of food and medicine. We call up on the world to open up its eyes into us now.
ክሳብ ሕዚ እንካብ የተሓሳስበናን
The world should go beyond rhetoric condemnations. Thousands of Tigrayans are dying every day due to the siege placed in Tigray. We need immediate help. Perpetrators of the Tigray genocide must also be brought into justice.
The IDPs stated that they are in a devastating situation and said that their suffering could even get worse if they don't get an immediate assistance from humanitarian organizations as soon as possible.
Desta Hailu Gabra, a resident of Maqala and a mother of 2 children, was the sole provider in her household before she was diagnosed with an ovarian cancer in August of 2020. Desta says her family abroad used to support her and her children before the start of the siege that has discontinued banking services and telecommunication. Meron Eman.
Desta Hailu Gabra is a mother of 2. She says she was the sole breadwinner in the household until August of 2020, when she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
It's been a year and 8 months since I was diagnosed with cancer. I was receiving treatment at Tigrai hospital. My uterus was surgically removed. Before the war, I used to wash clothes and other part-time work to support my family. But the cancer is back again, and I have had to get back on medication the past 6 months.
Desta says her and her family's economic circumstance has been just as distressing as her health condition.
I'm suffering, and I have no one to help me. The only ones that could were my neighbors. But the siege has affected everyone, and it's difficult for anyone to support us. My neighbors are constantly worried about me, and I'm always worried that I might have become a burden to them. I know nothing about the whereabouts of my son, and as for my daughter, she's a student, but she's not going to school because she has to take care of me. I can't afford to buy her school material and books anyways. It's people in the neighborhood that did that for her.
Due to the ongoing siege that has discontinued banking services and all forms of communication, it has meant that families like Desta don't only have limited opportunity for work, but also have no means through they can receive remittance from the family members abroad.
Before the siege, my family abroad used to support me, but they can't help me now because there is no means for us to communicate. Everything is shut down, and even people here can't help me because the banks are closed. I'm helpless. I can't care for myself. I have to depend on others.
But throughout all this hardship, Desta says her community has been right by her side, supporting her in any way they can.
Until this very day, my community has been by my side, helping me pay my rent and covering my transportation costs. They even collected money for my medication, as I can't afford it. It's important that people be there for each other.
According to the UN, close to 4 million people in Tigray are in dire need of medical assistance, a health crisis primarily caused as a